Now I want to introduce Kelly Smith, the easiest name in the list here. She's going to discuss some of the warning signs of serious mental health issues. Kelly?
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today. Slide. So before we talk about the red flags of serious mental illness, let's get a real quick definition of what mental illness is, what we know. We know that it is a medical condition and that it is treatable. There are therapies and medications currently available today that are indeed very effective, and more are being developed every day. And mental illness is something that affects nearly every American family. I was looking up some numbers, and the Centers for Disease Control estimates that on any given year, 25% of people report some sort of mental health symptom or need. And they estimate that across a lifetime, 50% of Americans will experience mental health needs or issues at some point. So to break it down, for a family of 4, one of you has a mental illness. So if you look around, you know, the other 3 people are fine, the last one it's you. What mental illness is not, it's not a personal failure or weakness. It's not a character flaw or defect. It's not something that you can will away. And again, it's not something that only happens to other people. You look around and obviously the numbers say very differently that it is a very common problem in our society. But question comes in with, you know somebody with mental health problems. Does that mean that they're dangerous? Well, the short answer is no, but let's take a look at some of the myths and facts around mental illness or mental health problems. So myth number 1, mental health problems are not common. Well, I think we already determined that they are. So nearly every family in America is affected. Myth number 2, people with mental health issues aren't able to hold a job. Well, I looked up the unemployment rate today, and in the nation it's 7.8%. But the Centers for Disease Control says that 25% of people have mental illness. Well, there's somebody with mental health problems working, otherwise the unemployment rate would be much, much higher. So they can, in fact, work, hold down a job, and be productive members of the community. Number 3, there's nothing that you can do about mental illness. Child and Family Center is an example of there is something you can do about mental illness. There are therapies and medications and resources the Child and Family Center has, as well as our local community. Myth number 4, and probably the most prevalent one right now after the Sandy Hook incident, people with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. Just because the Sandy Hook shooter was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, reportedly, that doesn't mean that all people with Asperger's syndrome will become murderers. The same thing with ADHD, schizophrenia, bipolar, or any of the other mental illness challenges that people experience. So the truth is, the vast majority of people experiencing mental health issues are no more dangerous or violent than you or I. All right, so that brings us to, well, what about the recent school shootings? What makes kids kill? So there have been, unfortunately, there's a lot of material out there that people are able to study, and they've come up with a list of things that they see as commonalities for people who commit these mass shootings. So number 1, victim of bullying, or they have bullied or intimidated young peers and younger children. We'll talk a little bit more about bullying in a few minutes, so after I get through this particular list. They may have brought a weapon to school. Okay, so we have a lot of the incidents. We'll talk about more about bullying in a minute. They're an outsider or on the fringe of their peer groups. And fringe peer groups are gangs or maybe groups of social outcasts. They don't fit neatly into the categories that are easily accepted by the other kids that they're in school with. They have a fascination with lethal weapons, or they spend a great deal of energy trying to learn about weapons, or actually acquire them for themselves. They prefer music, books, TV shows, and games with violent themes. Now again, this isn't a statement about violent video games. We hear a lot about that. But I was reading something, and one psychologist, he was a psychology professor at UCLA, he said that the reason that we train fighter pilots in simulators is because it works well. So that's something just to think about a little bit. A lot of these kids do poorly in school. They may have had truancies, suspensions, expulsions, or trouble in the community, trouble with the law. They've come to the attention of law enforcement and have continual battles with authority figures in their life. Obviously, a history of drug or alcohol abuse. Alcohol distorts thinking, it impairs judgment, and it lowers inhibition. So if we've got somebody who's having ideas about killing people, we certainly don't want them drinking or using drugs. So, and then cruelty to animals. A lot of times they have difficulty taking responsibility for their actions, even situations, difficult situations at school that they have created themselves. So the repercussions of which they're not able to take the responsibility for. They may have violent or aggressive outbursts, social withdrawal, and perhaps they've even attempted suicide. So these are things to watch out for, and I'll talk a little bit more later about what you can do if you see somebody with those warning signs. So what is bullying? We hear a lot about it in the media. It's a big topic. Obviously, you know, it's probably a bigger topic than we can cover here tonight. But what does it mean exactly? And there are 3 types of bullying. So we have verbal, which is teasing and name calling. The social bullying, it can be social media. I know Julie talked a little bit about the kids and technology and Facebook and Instagram. It's very easy for the kids to bully each other on the social media sites. But it can also be deliberately excluding someone, telling someone not to be friends with someone else, or starting rumors. And the last one, physical, that could be hitting, spitting, kicking, tripping, pulling a chair out from someone, or even blocking someone's path. So these are all examples of physical intimidation or bullying. So how can you prevent it? Well, the main thing is say something. If you see something, say something. Whether that's with your own child, or maybe your child comes home and reports to you a story of bullying that they've witnessed or that they've heard about. It's really important for us as parents and community members to speak up when we see the bullying, so that something can be done to address it. Don't assume that these things are normal and that kids will be kids and they'll just work it out and then it's a normal part of growing up. As we're seeing and as we're learning that these types of bullying and these incidents have long-lasting effects, not only on the children, but on our communities and our schools. So people that you can tell, you can talk to if it's happening at school, a teacher, school counselor, any member of the school staff, school nurse. All right, so how do I know if someone may be a danger to other people? Well, there's no crystal ball, but there are definitely warning signs that we're looking for with the children that we work with here. And those are immediate warning signs. So direct threats, revenge fantasies, saying things like, oh, they're going to be sorry, or I'm going to get them. You want to listen to those, okay? Detailed plans, drawings, diagrams, or hit lists. The Taft shooter recently up just north of here allegedly had a hit list of people that he wanted to take out during that school shooting. They have a realistic access to lethal weapons, guns, knives, explosive materials. You see a use, especially a recent increase in the use of drugs or alcohol. Again, we talked about that drugs and alcohol lower inhibition and impair judgment. So we certainly don't want somebody impaired with an access to a weapon who has these ideations. Very concerning. And behavior changes. As Susan and Gabby both mentioned, a child who suddenly becomes more withdrawn, sullen, angry, withdraws from family and friends, definitely concerning. Okay? So, I know someone who has these warning signs, well, what do I do now? Well, what we've done is we've prepared a handout that I highly recommend that you all grab. It has all kinds of community resources and places you can call for information. There's a lot of information on the web that's available, and also our contact information here at the Child and Family Center. So what can you do to help somebody with mental health needs? Well, there's a few things. You know, as a community, I think it's really important that we share, as a community, we need to learn and share as much as we can about mental health needs and people with those mental health needs. And if you hear something that isn't right or isn't correct, speak up. So again, just like with the bullying, you want to speak up. You want to educate people on what you know, what you've learned about people with mental health needs. Treat people with respect with mental health needs, just like you would anyone else, your friends, your family. You don't want to use labels. I think Susan mentioned words like crazy or loony or psycho. Those don't really help. Those only serve to further alienate someone with mental health needs rather than helping them to feel accepted and included into our community. Saying things like, dismissive, like, oh, she's a schizophrenic. That's not helpful either. It reduces a person to their mental health problems. You want to say something like, she is a person who has schizophrenia. So she's a person first, and the schizophrenia is something she has. And finally, I just want to say it's really up to all of us as a community, again, to learn what we can about mental health issues, to help those among us with those mental health needs feel accepted into our community and respected. We also need to stay aware and speak up when we see things that are concerning, like the warning signs that I mentioned. So if you see something, say something. I think that's a new campaign for awareness for mental health issues. So if you see something that's concerning, talk to someone, make someone else aware, don't sit on the information. And I think it's not just for our children, but it's for our schools and for our community as well. Thank you.